You think you know who you are. Really, you do. You build your identity from these simple, solid bricks. Name Chloe Adams. Age 21. Hometown, a sleepy suburb in Ohio. It's a short, easy list. For me, the most solid brick of all, the foundation for the whole house, was a simple two-word answer. Only child. It wasn't just a fact. It was my entire social geography. It was quiet holidays with just my mom and me. It was learning to entertain myself in a silent house. It was this strange empty space at the dinner table that I never thought to question. My identity was a circle, drawn around two people, me and mom. That was the whole world. You think you know who you are until one message, on a boring Tuesday afternoon, rewrites everything. The kind of message that takes that neat little house you build and blows it apart, brick by brick, until you're left standing in the rubble, wondering if you ever knew anything at all. I always thought I was an only child. I was sure of it. And then I got a Facebook message from a stranger. A stranger with a name I didn't know, from a city I'd never been to, who looked oddly, terrifyingly familiar. This is the story of how I met my sister, the one I never knew I had. Asterisk, the notification sound was nothing special, just the standard tinny ding from my laptop. I was supposed to be studying for my midterms, but really, I was in a deep dive of mindless scrolling. The kind where your thumb moves on its own and your brain is pleasantly numb. The message popped up in the corner of my screen. A name I didn't recognize, Sarah Jenkins, probably spam. Or someone from a group project I'd forgotten about. I clicked on it with zero expectations, and then I saw the words. Just 7 of them, my breath caught in my throat. I leaned closer to the screen as if the pixels might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. I read it again, my lips moving silently. Then I whispered it out loud to my empty dorm room, the words feeling foreign and heavy in the air. Hey, I think I'm your sister. My first reaction wasn't belief. It wasn't even shock. It was a cold, immediate wave of suspicion. This had to be a joke, a really cruel, elaborate prank, or a scam. People do weird things online. Maybe someone had scraped my photos and was trying some bizarre identity theft thing. My mind raced through a dozen logical, cynical explanations. Because the alternative was simply impossible. I clicked on her name. Sarah Jenkins. Her profile picture loaded, and the floor dropped out from under me. It wasn't like looking in a mirror. Not exactly. This girl, Sarah, she was different. Her hair was a lighter shade of brown, cut shorter. She had a small piercing in her nose that I would never be brave enough to get, but her face, it was like a remix of my own. She had the same slightly crooked smile that only shows up in my photos when I'm genuinely happy. She had the same wide-set eyes, the same curve of the cheekbones that I got from my mom. It was like looking at a version of myself from a parallel universe. A version who made different choices, lived a different life, but started from the exact same blueprint. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden silence of the room. I scrolled down her profile, my hand trembling on the trackpad. Her feed was normal. Pictures with friends, complaints about exams, photos of a golden retriever. She lived in Oregon. I'd never been to Oregon. Denial was still fighting a losing battle in my head. It's a coincidence. Some people just look alike, but the curiosity was a rising tide, drowning out everything else. I kept scrolling back in time, past her college photos, past her high school graduation, and then I found it. A post from last year, happy 22nd birthday to me. So grateful for my amazing family who chose me all those years ago. Hashtag adopted and moved 22. She was exactly 1 year and 2 weeks older than me. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. My world, which had been solid and predictable 5 minutes ago, was now tilting on its axis. I pushed away from my desk, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I needed something real, something tangible. I went to my closet and pulled down a dusty shoebox from the top shelf. It was filled with old photos, the kind with faded colors and white borders. My whole life in a disorganized pile. I spread them across my bed. Me as a baby, all bald head and gummy smiles. Me on my first day of kindergarten, dwarfed by my backpack. Me at every single birthday, always with just my mom, a small cake between us. There were no other kids in the important photos. No cousins. My age, no siblings. I'd never thought about it, not really. It was just the way things were. My fingers stopped on a picture of my mom. It was from before I was born, I guessed. She was standing on a beach, her hair longer, a forced smile on her face. She looked young, so young, and so sad. I'd always thought she just looked tired in that photo. But now, looking at it through this new, fractured lens, I saw something else, a deep, hollowed-out sadness in her eyes. The same eyes I'd just seen on a stranger's Facebook profile. I scrambled back to my laptop, my mind racing, connecting dots I never knew existed. The secrecy. The way Mom always changed the subject when I asked about her life before me. The loneliness I sometimes felt, that persistent, nagging feeling that a piece of my own story was missing. I opened the message from Sarah Jenkins again. 7 little words that had become the key to a door I never knew was locked. Hey, I think I'm your sister. My suspicion was gone. My denial was gone. All that was left was a terrifying, all-consuming question. Could it be true? Asterisk. For the next hour, I didn't move from my desk. I didn't reply to the message. I just sat there staring at Sarah Jenkins's face on my screen while my own life replayed in my head like a movie I was suddenly seeing for the first time. It's a strange thing to become a detective in your own childhood, searching for clues you never knew were there. My entire life. The word alone wasn't a sad word. It was just a fact. It was the quiet hum of the refrigerator in our small house, a sound I knew better than any sibling's laugh. It was playing both sides of a board game, creating a personality for my imaginary opponent so I wouldn't feel too silly. It was Christmases and Thanksgivings with just me and Mom, a tiny, self-contained unit. Our traditions were small and sacred. Decorating the tree while listening to the same old vinyl record, baking cookies that only the two of us would eat. It was cozy. It was safe. It was incomplete. I just never realized it. Other kids had chaotic family gatherings. They'd complain about annoying cousins who broke their toys or older brothers who teased them. I'd listen with a kind of detached fascination, like an anthropologist studying a foreign tribe. My family tree wasn't a tree at all. It was a straight line. My grandparents had passed away when I was too young to remember them, and Mom always said her siblings lived far away, that they'd just drifted apart. I never pressed it. It was her story to tell, and she clearly didn't want to. The walls she built around her past were quiet, but they were made of steel. Anytime a question veered too close to her life before me, her whole posture would change. Her shoulders would tense up. Her smile would become a thin, brittle line. She'd give a vague, one-sentence answer and expertly steer the conversation back to me, my school, my friends, my future. It was a masterful defense, and I learned early on not to breach it, except for one time. I must have been about 12. We were in the car, driving home from the library, and the golden afternoon light was streaming through the windows. It felt safe. I was reading a book where the main character had a big, messy, wonderful family, and a thought just bubbled up, innocent and unplanned. "Mom?" I asked, looking at her profile as she drove. "Did you ever want more kids? Like, did you ever wish I had a brother or sister?" The change was immediate and terrifying. Her knuckles went white on the steering wheel. The air in the car went from warm and lazy to ice cold. She didn't look at me. She just stared straight ahead at the road, her jaw tight. "No," she said, and her voice was sharp, like a piece of broken glass. "Why would you ask that?" "I don't know," I stammered, shrinking back in my seat. "Just wondering." "Well, don't." She took a sharp breath. "We have each other, Chloe. We are enough. We are more than enough. Do you understand?" I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. It was the first and last time I ever saw her truly snap at me. It wasn't just anger in her voice. It was a raw, desperate panic. It was the sound of a carefully constructed wall about to collapse. After that, the topic of siblings became forbidden territory, a locked room in our quiet house that I knew never to approach again. Now, sitting in my dorm room, that memory came flooding back, no longer just a weird, uncomfortable moment, but a giant flashing neon sign, more than enough. She hadn't been reassuring me. She had been reassuring herself. The pieces were scattered all around me, the sadness in her old photos, the fierce secrecy, the desperate loneliness I sometimes saw in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. And now this message. From a girl with my mother's smile. My childhood wasn't a story about a happy family of two. It was a ghost story. And I was just now realizing I'd been living with the ghost my entire life. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. But underneath it, something new was growing, a fierce, desperate need to know. I had to reply. I had to open the locked door. Typing a reply felt like disarming a bomb. What do you even say to the person who might be your long-lost sister? "Hey, weird coincidence, I also have that smile." No, this is a prank, right? Too defensive. I typed and deleted at least 5 different responses before landing on something simple, something that felt as fragile and uncertain as I did. "This is going to sound crazy, but I think you might be right. Your profile picture, you look a lot like my mom." I hit send before I could second guess myself again. The delivered receipt appeared instantly, then the 3 little dots pulsing. She was typing. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. The seconds stretched into an eternity. A new message popped up. "Sarah, I know. I can't stop staring at your pictures. Can we talk, like, on the phone? I feel like I'm going to explode." A voice chat. My stomach did a nervous flip. This was getting real, fast. Texting felt safe, buffered. A voice would make it undeniable. I could hear her. She could hear me. But I typed back, "Yes, okay." My phone buzzed a second later with a call from an Oregon number. I stared at the screen at her name, Sarah Jenkins. I took a deep, shaky breath and swiped to answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Hi." A voice on the other end replied. It was clear, a little higher than mine, and trembling slightly. "Hi, Chloe." "Yeah, hi, Sarah." An awkward silence hung between us, thick with 21 years of unspoken history. What were the rules for this? What was the etiquette for meeting the sister you never knew you had over the phone? She broke the silence first with a nervous little laugh. "Okay, this is officially the weirdest day of my life." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "You have no idea," I laughed back, and the tension broke just a little. "Okay," she said, her voice becoming more serious. Let's do this. Let's figure this out." My birthday is April 16th, 1999. My blood ran cold. Mine is April 30th, 2000, exactly 1 year and 2 weeks apart. It fit perfectly. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay, what's her mom's name?" This was it, the final key. "Corinne Adams," I said. Her maiden name was Peterson. For a moment, there was nothing but static on the line. Then I heard a soft choke sound, a sob. That's her, Sarah whispered. Her name was Karen Peterson. It was on my original birth certificate, my parents. My parents gave it to me when I turned 18. I sank down onto my bed, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. It was true, all of it. The impossible, life-altering, earth-shattering thing was true. I had a sister. I was listening to my sister. So how? I started, my voice cracking. How did you? It was a closed adoption, she explained, her voice thick with emotion. My parents are amazing, Chloe. They're my parents. But I always knew, I always felt like there was this pull, a question mark I couldn't get out of my head. A few years ago, the laws changed in the state where I was born. It allowed adoptees to request their original birth records. I got the certificate, I got her name, and I've been searching ever since. I found her on Facebook, but her profile was private, and then I saw you, tagged in one of her public photos from years ago. And your face, it was like everything clicked into place. She told me her story, placed for a loving adoption, right after she was born. Grew up in Portland with two wonderful parents and a younger brother, their biological son. She had the life I'd seen in books. The chaotic family gatherings, the sibling rivalry, all of it. And yet, she'd spent her whole life with a missing piece. Just like me, Dot, we were two halves of a story neither of us knew how to read. She was 17. Sarah said softly, her voice filled with a strange mix of sadness and understanding. She was just a kid, Chloe. And in that moment, I saw my mother not as the secretive, walled-off woman I knew, but as a scared 17-year-old girl, forced to make an impossible choice. The anger I should have felt just wasn't there. It was replaced by a profound, aching sorrow for her, for Sarah, and for the years we'd all lost. We stayed on the phone for another hour, the conversation flowing from awkward fact-checking to a surreal, beautiful exchange of lives. We talked about everything and nothing, our favorite foods, our majors in college, the weird way we both hated the sound of people chewing. It was like talking to a stranger and my oldest friend all at once. For the first time in my life, I wasn't an only child. I wasn't alone. And I didn't even know how to begin to understand what that meant. Asterisk. The 2-hour drive home for the weekend was the longest of my life. Every mile felt like a countdown. The weight of Sarah's name, of her voice, of our shared story, sat beside me in the passenger seat. The familiar landmarks of my town, the old oak tree on the corner, the faded sign for the local diner, all looked different, like pieces of a life that no longer entirely belonged to me. When I walked through the front door, my mom was in the kitchen, just as I knew she would be. The air smelled of cinnamon and tea. It was the scent of home, of safety, of my entire childhood. "Hey, sweetie," she said, turning with a warm smile. "You're just in time. I made your favorite." Her smile was so normal, so blissfully unaware, and it shattered my heart. I knew that in a few minutes I was going to destroy it. I couldn't play along. I couldn't ask about her week or talk about my classes. I just stood in the doorway of the kitchen, my car keys cold in my hand. "Mom," I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. "I need to ask you something." Her smile faltered just a little. She turned off the kettle. "What is it?" "Chloe, you look so serious." I took a deep breath. "I need to ask you about your maiden name, about being Karen Peterson." The color drained from her face. It happened so fast, it was like watching a light switch off. Her entire body went rigid. The warmth in the room vanished. This was the same woman from that day in the car, the one with knuckles of steel and a voice like ice. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice flat and cold. She turned her back to me, busying herself with the teacups, her movements stiff and unnatural. That's a silly question. It's not a silly question, I pushed, stepping further into the room. I talked to her mom. I talked to Sarah. At the sound of the name, a teacup slipped from her fingers, clattering into the sink. She didn't flinch. She just stood there, her back to me, perfectly still. I don't know any Sarah. She whispered, but the lie was weak, pathetic. This was the moment. The final, undeniable truth. She was born on April 16th, 1999, I said, my voice shaking now. You were 17. You had to give her up for adoption. The steel in her spine finally dissolved. Her shoulders slumped. Her hands came up to cover her face, and a sound escaped her throat. Not a loud wail, but a fractured, broken sound that had been held inside for 22 years. She stumbled back and sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her body trembling with silent, racking sobs. For a moment, I just watched her. This woman I thought I knew, completely undone by a secret I was never meant to find. The anger I had anticipated. Feeling wasn't there. All I felt was a vast, cavernous sadness. I walked over and knelt in front of her. Mom? She finally lowered her hands. Her face was wrecked with tears, her eyes red and pleading. I'm so sorry, Chloe, she choked out. I'm so sorry. And then the story came tumbling out. The words were heavy with decades of shame. She was 17, scared and alone. Her parents, my grandparents, the ones I barely knew, were devoutly religious and horrified by the shame she had brought upon their family. They handled it. They sent her away to a home for unwed mothers for the last few months of her pregnancy. She wasn't allowed to tell anyone. She gave birth, held her baby girl for 1 hour, and then they took her away. She was forced to sign the papers. It was a different time, she wept. I had no choice. They told me I had no choice. They told me I was ruining my life and that I had to give her a chance at a better one. She returned home a month later, and the subject was never spoken of again. It was a closed chapter, a buried secret. A year later, she met my father. When she got pregnant with me, she was terrified, but this time she was older. She was an adult. She could keep me. She could protect me. I was so afraid, she whispered, looking at me with an intensity I'd never seen before. Every day of your life, I was afraid you'd somehow feel it, that a piece of me was missing, that I wasn't whole. I tried so hard to be enough for you, to be more than enough. The words from the car. Now they made a terrible, heartbreaking sense. I reached out and took her hand. The secret was out. The ghost was in the room with us. And for the first time, our quiet little house felt like it might have enough space to heal. The days after the confrontation were quiet and strange. The secret was no longer a weight in our house, but its absence had left an echo. My mom and I talked more than we had in years, navigating this new territory with fragile, careful steps. But my real anchor, the person who understood the surreal vertigo of it all, was Sarah. We were on the phone constantly. The calls were no longer about fact-checking our past. They were about building a future. One night, a week after I'd been home, we were on a video call. I could see her room in Portland, posters on the wall for bands I also liked. You know, what's weird? She said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. It was a gesture I did 100 times a day. I was just thinking, I wonder what our family photos would have looked like. And just like that, we started to create a ghost album, a collection of memories that never happened. We definitely would have had matching horrible Christmas sweaters, I said, laughing. Oh, totally, she agreed instantly. And Mom would have forced us to wear them for the Christmas card. I would have looked mortified, and you, being the younger one, would have thought it was the coolest thing ever. We imagined it all. Sarah, being older, teaching me how to ride a bike, me probably scraping my knees, and her telling me to be tough. We imagined sharing a room whispering secrets across the dark after Mom had told us to go to sleep. We imagined fighting over the TV remote, borrowing each other's clothes without asking, and defending each other fiercely if anyone at school was mean. It was beautiful and it was agonizing. For every happy, imagined scene, there was the sharp pang of regret for the reality. 21 birthdays we'd missed, 22 Christmases apart, all the school plays, graduations, and first heartbreaks we hadn't been there for. The empty space at my dinner table finally had a name, and the what ifs were endless. To fill the void, we started sharing the real stories. What did you do for your 10th birthday? I asked her one night. My parents threw me a huge pool party. I got my first real two-wheeler bike. It was blue, she said. What about you? Mom took me to the science museum. We got dipping dots, and I got a book about astronauts. Our lives had been so different, yet as we talked, we discovered 1,000 tiny, bizarre similarities. We both hated pickles. We both put ketchup on our macaroni and cheese. We both had the same recurring dream about being able to fly, but only about 3 feet off the ground. We were strangers who shared the same blood, the same quirks, the same invisible threads woven into our DNA. Our first few phone calls had been awkward and surreal. Now, they were the most natural thing in the world. She was the first person I texted in the morning and the last person I talked to at night. I was learning the rhythm of her life, and she was learning mine. We were building a bridge across 21 years of silence, one conversation at a time. One night, after an hour of talking, a comfortable silence fell between us. Chloe, she said softly, yeah. This isn't enough, she said, and I knew exactly what she meant. Talking is great, but it's not enough. My heart started to pound with a new kind of feeling, not fear or sadness, but a bright, soaring excitement. I know, I whispered. We have to meet. The decision hung in the air, real and solid. We had spent so much time looking back at what could have been. Now, for the first time, we were looking forward to what could be. It was like planning a family reunion with a stranger I felt I'd known my whole life. Asterisk, we decided to meet halfway. A small, neutral city in Idaho that neither of us had ever been to. It felt right, like we were starting our story on a blank page. But 2 weeks leading up to the trip were a blur of nervous energy and giddy excitement. I must have packed and repacked my overnight bag 5 times. What do you wear to meet the sister you've spent 21 years without? Should I be casual? Should I dress up? It felt as monumental and terrifying as a first date and a job interview combined. Sarah and I texted constantly. Our messages a frantic mix of logistics and pure, unadulterated panic. Sarah, what if we have nothing to talk about? In person, me, impossible. We haven't shut up for 2 weeks. Sarah, I know, but what if it's awkward? What if you don't like me? Me, Sarah, what if you don't like me? The morning of the trip, I barely slept. I drove for 6 hours with butterflies doing acrobatics in my stomach. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown. I got there 20 minutes early, my hands shaking so much I could barely hold my phone. I sat at a small table by the window, watching every single person who walked by, my heart leaping into my throat each time a woman with brown hair came near the door. And then I saw her. She was standing across the street, looking at her phone, then up at the coffee shop sign. Even from a distance, the familiarity was breathtaking. The way she stood, the way she tilted her head. It was me, but not me. She took a deep breath. I could see her shoulders rise and fall, and started to. Cross the street. The bell above the door chimed, and she stepped inside. Our eyes met across the crowded room. The noise of the coffee shop, the clatter of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversations, all of it faded away into a dull hum. For a second, we just stared at each other. It was surreal. Here was the face from the screen, the voice from my phone, but in 3 dimensions, real, breathing. Here that she broke into a smile first, that same slightly crooked smile. I felt my own lips mirror the expression. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, and she started walking toward me. We met in the middle of the coffee shop, and without a word, we hugged Dot. It wasn't an awkward, polite hug. It was desperate. A hug that was trying to make up for 21 years of missed hugs. Her arms wrapped around me, and it was the strangest, most wonderful feeling in the world. It felt like coming home to a place I'd never been. It felt like meeting a mirror, but a mirror that could hug you back. I buried my face in her shoulder, and I could feel her shaking, or maybe that was me. Maybe it was both of us. Dot, when we finally pulled apart, we were both laughing and crying at the same time. "Hi," she said, her voice thick. "Hi," I managed to say back. We sat down, and the awkwardness I'd been so afraid of never came. The conversation was immediate, effortless. It was like we were picking up a conversation that had started years ago. We talked for hours, long after our coffees went cold. We compared our hands, marveling at how we had the same long fingers. We discovered we both had a tiny scar above our right eyebrow, hers from falling off a swing, mine from walking into a cabinet. We finished each other's sentences. Dot, it was in the little things, the shared quirks, that the reality of our connection truly sank in. It wasn't just about sharing a mother or having similar faces. It was in the way we both gestured, with our hands when we got excited, the way we both snorted when we laughed too hard. These were the things that biology had passed down, these tiny, secret signatures of sisterhood that had been waiting inside both of us all along. The bond was instant, unbreakable, and absolute. Asterisk, I spent my whole life feeling like something was missing. It was a low hum in the background of my quietest moments, a question mark at the end of my own identity. I thought it was a thing, a piece of information, some grand, abstract answer to a question I was too afraid to ask. Turns out, it wasn't a something. It was someone. The story of how I found my sister doesn't have a clean, perfect ending because it isn't over, it's just beginning. My mom and Sarah have started talking, exchanging tentative emails and planning a phone call. It's a fragile process, heavy with 2 decades of pain and regret, but it's a start. Our family tree is no longer a straight line. It's finally starting to grow branches, messy and complicated and beautiful. I didn't just find a sister. In Sarah, I found a version of myself that had been waiting to be seen. I see my own laugh in her, that louder, more confident. I see my own curiosity, but bolder and more adventurous. She is the other half of my story, the parallel life that I now get to be a part of. We send each other photos the ugly Christmas, sweaters we're forcing our mom to buy, selfies from across the country, making the same silly face. We're filling up that ghost album, one real memory at a time. For a long time, I thought the secret my mother kept was a betrayal, a wall she built to keep me out, but now I see it for what it was. A fortress she built around her own 17-year-old heart, a fortress built of shame and fear. Finding Sarah didn't just break down that wall. It let the light in. Dot, not every secret is a betrayal. Some are just stories waiting for the right time to be told. Some are just wounds waiting to be healed. And my story? It's finally whole.